Hey, welcome back. In this video, what we're going to do is we're going to go through the first part of Maya's narrative. Now, this is really important because if we can understand the building blocks of the dream, then we can start to understand why things happen the way they do, and also why we have the self-concepts we do. But also we can start to interpret the things around us and actually be able to understand why they happen the way they do as well. So what we'll do is we'll kind of quickly do an overview of where we are now by going back to the very start. So remember, we've got this Satchitananda. This is who we really are in reality, because it's the only thing that's real, and that's being eternal, self-sustaining and unchanging. However, what has happened is that has fallen asleep through putting a veil of forgetfulness over itself. And when it falls asleep, the mind will split into, the sleeping mind that is, will split into three different parts. Shiva, which is the memory of who this second part is, the dreamer, who that is in reality. So that's all that Shiva represents. We've got the dreamer whose only function is to choose which direction he wants to go. And we've also got Maya, who is obviously the voice for individuality, which says you can have a life independent of the life from which you have come. We've also got Brahman, who the dreamer now perceives as his father. The dreamer doesn't think this is himself, because it doesn't make sense to think I've given birth to myself. So the dreamer will look up back to the awake state and have a concept of that being his father, which we have named Brahman. So as we mentioned, what the dreamer does do, because this is obviously all happening in time and space, is he does choose to go down to Maya. And at that stage, he didn't think that there'd be any negative consequences for that, because he thought, well, I've always got Shiva by my side. However, what happens is a second veil goes over the dreamer now when he goes down into the second split. And that pushes Shiva, the memory of who he really is, and also the memory of who he really is in reality, and also this concept of who he is in the dream, which is the dreamer who can choose to awaken if he so desires. So both of those things are now pushed out of his awareness and repressed. So now all he is aware of is what Maya is going to allow into his awareness. And the first thing that she allows into his awareness is a sense of complete well-being, a sense of euphoria. So now the dreamer has come to life, because before this he was just in a state of potentiality. But now he has come to life, and this is infused with such euphoria that the dreamer starts to think that this is of great value. And because this is of great value, then unconsciously he is going to become even less willing to hear what Shiva has to say, which is that you are just dreaming. The only viable thing to do is to awaken. So because this is now infused with such value, then this is actually starting to already become the enemy. However, now we're going to get to the point where Maya actually comes in with her story. And remember, her story is all about trying to get the dreamer as far away from this point of power as she can. Because even though there's this veil of forgetfulness over him, as soon as he comes down into Maya's system, it's only one veil. And, you know, Shiva could break through and remind the dreamer that who he really is, that he has the power, all the power in the sleeping mind. So Maya is completely afraid of this. So her story is always going to be to drive the dreamer further away from this point of power. And the way she does that is through fear. And the way that she raises this sense of fear is through a narrative. And that narrative starts like this. She says, well, congratulations, you know this feeling that you've got of individuality? Well, the good news is it's all real. However, what you don't realize is that it has come because you have destroyed your father, Brahman. So remember that Brahman is in reality who the dreamer really is in reality. But she says, well, you've actually destroyed him, because the dreamer no longer recognizes that he's just fallen asleep and there's just veils over him. No, they are now interpreted via Maya as being not veils, but actually that there's nothing on the other side of these. And there's nothing on the other side of these veils is because the dreamer destroyed it. So this sense of euphoria, of having individuality at no cost whatsoever, has completely gone from the state of these, heights of euphoria all the way down to this complete state of terror, of thinking, what have I done? So she continues on this story and said, well, do you know what? You think you've actually destroyed him, but you didn't quite finish the job, and he is actually still alive, and he's not happy about what you've done. So the dreamer here has obviously gone down from, this is the first idea of being sinful. And our sinful is just this belief of doing something wrong. And on the metaphysical level, the something wrong is always associated with the destruction of Brahman, the destruction of reality. So you could understand the massive amounts of guilt that the dreamer will start to feel by having such an enormous thing that he has done wrong. So now the sense of doing something wrong, but also the sense of being something wrong, which is this guilty feeling, starts to be infused within the dreamer's self-concept. That he's gone from euphoria down to complete guilt for this massive crime that he thinks he has done. And remember, this is the get out of jail free, that he hasn't actually done it. That this has all only been mediated through Maya's story, and that it is all a make-believe for her own purposes, to keep her own dream going. So what happens is the psychological dynamics of feeling guilty is that there's this unconscious feeling that there's going to be a punishment coming back. So every criminal who has done a crime, even though there might not be anyone in the vicinity that knows he's done the crime, he's obviously going to start having a sense of paranoia because his own sense of guilt demands that he be punished. So this is in the same way for the dreamer now, because of the amazing and enormous sense of guilt. He starts to fear that the punishment is going to be coming from him. And who's it going to be coming from but Brahman himself? So at this level, at the complete metaphysical level, the dreamer thinks he is going to be completely destroyed through Brahman coming back to extract his revenge. So at this stage, what the dreamer is the ultimate victimizer. That in a way, he has become more powerful than reality himself. Why? Because he has been able to destroy reality. That he's been able to destroy the Satchidananda, his father Brahman, and he has then come to life through that destruction of reality. So this is why this is really important concept to understand, that from now on, life is always going to be seen through the destruction of something else. Because Maya has told the dreamer that your life has come through the attack on reality, that you are only able to get that through destroying your father. And then you've infused that life in your own, and that's how you've come to life. Now, if we understand that every dream is simply a manifestation of ideas in the mind, then we can understand how this concept and idea gets reflected out in time and space. That we can see it on the sports fields, or in the business boardrooms, or on the battlefields. That everybody who walks onto those fields believes that by victorying over somebody else, they will have a better sense of self. So we can see this obviously in sports, that the one who victors over other people is the one who feels good at the end of the game, and the one who is vanquished feels bad. And that's because it all goes back to the very start of how the dream started. That through Maya's narrative, the dreamer thinks, well, life comes through victory. So we can see in those cases on the sports field that the one who is actually held in the highest regard is the one who is able to beat as the most people as possible. That he's the one that then stands on the top of the podium, and he's the one that gets awards. And that's because that is what's sponsored in Maya's dream. That victory, that it's going to be a dog or dog, there's a dog eat dog, that it's a dog eat dog world, and the one who's able to vanquish everybody else is the one who again comes to life and should be celebrated. So there's also this has also been reflected in primitive cultures through cannibalism, and that's obviously when tribes would fight. If one of the warriors from the opposing tribes was captured and killed, then the tribe that was able to capture him would eat the flesh, thinking that they were going to be able to take his power into their own bodies, which again reflects this whole story that Maya has told the dreamer at the very start. So what we have here is the dreamer in a very fearful sense of self, and that fear now starts to look back up and projects all of that onto Brahman. So now Brahman has gone from who it really is in reality, completely loving, completely eternal, who doesn't recognize anything that's actually happening in Maya's mind. However, because of those dynamics that the dreamer is now going through of the sense of guilt, he obviously has to project that out and actually think that, well, the punishment is actually going to come from Brahman. So you can start to appreciate how this story, this narrative, has completely deluding the dreamer's mind, and he no longer understands reality as it really is. That reality isn't now going to welcome him back. No, it is coming for him to actually punish him. So also Shiva now is going to be seen as the enemy, because he would think, well, Shiva must be part of, this whole strategy against me. So now he is not just unwilling to hear, he actually actively is going to resist it, because he thinks he's not just going to tell him it's not real. He thinks he's now going to come down and help destroy him as a representative of the Father. So that is what is going to make the dreamer want to actually start moving further and further away from these points of where the dreamer now thinks the punishment is coming from. So hopefully you can appreciate how cunning and, in a sense, intelligent this whole structure is that Maya is creating for the dreamer. But remember, the dreamer isn't going to get anything out of it. What it is all done is for the purposes of Maya to be able to keep the dreamer moving further and further away from the actual point of power. So yeah, moving forward, just start to be aware of these ideas and start to look how in society the ones who are held up in the highest regards are the ones who are able to victor over other people. And just start to be able to connect the dots back to the very building blocks, and also recognize that because Maya has made reality now seem very fragile, that now that's how we perceive reality, because all we are perceiving in a dream is those ideas. And those ideas is that reality is fragile, because we have this belief that the dreamer has been able to actually destroy it. But remember, all these ideas are made up, that none of this actually changes what reality actually is. This thing that can't be changed, that is eternal and is self-sustaining. That all of these ideas are only now going to be happening in the unconscious mind, or in Maya's mind, which then project out into the dream of time and space. So go through this video probably a couple of times, just so you get a good grasp of what we've gone through here. And feel free to keep the conversation going down below. And as always, I'll see you in the next lesson.